At the beginning, a system presents viewers with detailed information about a special mission that has the crucial objective of installing a sophisticated teleportation system between two distinct planets in the galaxy, referred to by this scientific organization merely as Machine 1 and Machine 2. It is mentioned that 80 years ago, Machine 2 was sent to a remote and distant planet, believed to potentially harbor intelligent life, and that would be the decisive day of connection, where an uncrewed flight would be conducted to test the link and collect basic data about the conditions and characteristics of that alien world. Once connected, a manned flight would take place after the initial test, orbiting the planet twice before returning to base. A small spacecraft traverses the vastness of space, piloted by a lonely pilot who receives crucial information via radio, instructing him to approach Machine 1. After receiving confirmation that the link with the other machine has been successfully established, the pilot, filled with determination, accelerates his ship toward the center of the enormous structure of the machine, hopeful that everything will go as planned. Suddenly, he sees a bright flash of light, and then faints, having a disconcerting glimpse of himself holding a baby in his arms. When the pilot wakes up, he realizes that the ship's systems are trying to stabilize its trajectory in the orbit of the new planet, but to no avail. A shrill alarm sounds, indicating to the pilot that he must evacuate the ship immediately, as it is on an imminent collision course with the planet's surface. He then prepares and hurriedly heads to the emergency capsule, fastening the safety belts and initiating the ship's decoupling. The capsule then gracefully follows its trajectory toward the planet's surface as the pilot watches everything with a gasping breath and a mix of fear and adrenaline. As he approaches the ground, he activates a mechanism that ejects his seat from the capsule, a last resort to try to ensure his safety. Unconscious, the pilot again catches a glimpse of a child watching him as he falls, unconscious, to the ground. Upon waking, he finds himself in a desolate, desert-like environment, with a large storm dangerously approaching. Quickly, he gathers his equipment and sees in the distance the smoke of what might be the incandescent remains of his ship. The pilot decides to follow the smoke, but upon arrival realizes everything is in flames, making it unfit for salvage. He then sits down, dazed, and checks what he has in his pack. As he tries to get up, he feels a serious dizziness and, upon checking his equipment, realizes his oxygen reserve is perilously low. The pilot decides he needs to change the breathing equipment. He removes the gas mask he is wearing and puts on a simpler respirator temporarily, as he notices that the planet's atmosphere seems breathable. The pilot then begins recording a log. He identifies himself as James and reports on the crash of his ship, the geographical conditions of the planet, and that there are still no signs of intelligent life in that desolate place. While taking a sip of water, James hears a strange noise nearby and gets startled, but upon checking finds nothing, resulting in a mistake that causes him to spill his water bottle. He camps out at night, watching the large structure of Machine 2 in the sky as a sign of hope and despair combined. He then records another report, stating that it has been 24 hours since he arrived on the planet and that he has yet to receive any response from the control center on Earth. Without water, he sets off in search of a source of clean water. After a brief walk under the scorching heat, James finds a stream and performs rudimentary tests to determine whether the water is drinkable, finally enjoying a good gulp of fresh, revitalizing water. He walks a little further and finds remnants of intelligent life in that inhospitable place by observing an extensive wall that spans much of the path. James walks along the wall for a time, fascinated and apprehensive, and upon looking at a hill ahead, he realizes that there is something on top. With his binoculars, James observes that there seems to be a sheep up there. However, a sudden gunshot noise echoes, and the animal falls to the ground, prompting James to look closely. When he glances to the side, he spots a biped walking toward the dead animal, and upon seeing what appears to be a hostile creature, the being then stops and turns its body in James's direction, who waves his arm, believing that the creature could be friendly, but he soon hears a shot fired in his direction. James flees from the area and ends up being pursued by some androids, which move quickly toward him. Skillfully, he evades them and proceeds along a road he finds further up, but soon is startled by the approach of a large vehicle, causing him to roll down a hill. Quite injured and dazed, James then arrives at a large brick structure resembling a house and decides to spend the night there in search of shelter. The next day, James records another message, informing that he is running low on food and is considering an alternative escape plan that, even in his tired and confused mind, seems to be the only viable way out. He states that there is intelligent life on the planet and that they have machines. Therefore, there is a possibility they can launch him back into orbit around the planet so he can return home. James walks along the road again. Starting to feel the effects of the intense heat, he pauses to breathe and eat a little. He lies down on the dry grass and closes his eyes, bringing again the visions of a baby in his arms to his tormented mind. Suddenly, James is abruptly brought back to reality with the sound of a gunshot. Upon waking, he observes that in the fields far off, various robots and tractors seem to be working tirelessly in the area, creating a scene of intense mechanical activity. He then collects his things and moves away from that point, entering a nearby forest. James spots a robot walking among the trees and decides to follow it cautiously, but quickly loses sight of it. In a moment of restlessness, James sits at the base of a tree to catch his breath, but is soon attacked by a humanoid robot and another resembling a dog exhibiting aggressive behavior. The humanoid fires at James several times, who manages to escape for a while, but soon is hit in the hand by the robot and falls to the ground, feeling excruciating pain radiating throughout his body. He spots a nearby tree branch, and as a desperate measure, he grabs it and runs at the robots, delivering a blow to the humanoid that destroys part of its equipment, leaving it apparently disoriented and confused. James takes the opportunity and starts to flee the area as fast as possible. After evading the robots and, with blood loss emerging from his wound, he collapses on the ground and retrieves a bandage from his vest to cover the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. He attempts to get up. However, already quite weak and dazed, he falls back onto the ground and ends up fainting, falling into a deep sleep. Minutes later, James awakens and realizes, with a start of horror, that there is a quadruped robot beside him. The creature, resembling a pack mule, appears harmless, but still scared by all the previous events. James maintains a cautious distance. He then notices that the robot is staring intently at a metallic piece on the ground, a component that belonged to the robot that attacked him earlier. With agonizing hesitation, James picks up the piece, and to his surprise, the robot begins to follow him along the path, like a loyal dog following its master. They become unlikely travel companions, and unexpectedly, a new hope arises in James's heart. At one point, something catches James's attention at the roadside. He decides to record a message while examining the found object. He says it appears to be a type of container inscribed with intriguing alien writing. Upon taking the object in hand for closer inspection, we can see that it is actually a Jack Daniel's whiskey bottle, a disconcerting symbol of the world's decay they once knew. Suddenly, we see James's nose seem to undergo a change, altering shape in an almost imperceptible manner. On the robot accompanying him, a small identification plate, which previously appeared invisible, becomes visible. On it reads, "Property of the British Defense Department." Further ahead, James and the robot arrive at a small, conservatively styled and antiquated house. Inside, James finds various items left behind by its former inhabitants: radiation protection clothing, a messy bed, rusty firearms, and abandoned radio and video equipment. With effort, James turns on a projector that was on the table, and a home movie begins to play, showing a happy family enjoying themselves at a backyard barbecue, while smiles still linger on their faces. He then picks up a newspaper that, to him, appears to contain only jumbled words and letters, a mishmash of meaningless symbols. But as he focuses his eyes on the newspaper, the viewer is revealed what James couldn't comprehend. The newspaper, in English, reports the beginning of a Third World War, detailing how nuclear attacks had struck the capitals of various countries around the world. The home movie then shows a massive mushroom cloud explosion on the horizon, near the family's home, just before the recording abruptly ends amid the chaos. James observed in another newspaper clipping the news of a mass evacuation to underground shelters, a last gasp of hope for humanity. After dreaming again of the child in his arms, James awoke in the house and noticed that the robot was still focused on the piece of the humanoid robot he had found earlier. He clumsily handles a weapon he finds in the place and accidentally fires at some bottles. He then stores the weapon and piece in his bag and exits the house with the robot, which now seemed like a loyal ally for his survival. James observes the shape of the robot's back and decides to rest the bag on him. The robot then activates a mechanism to carry the load on its back and begins walking in a set direction. James believes the robot is returning home and thus decides to follow it silently. They then arrive at the ruins of what seems to have been a nuclear power plant, a monument to the pride and tragedy of a vanished civilization. James records a message, his voice now laden with the weight of his discoveries, speaking of understanding now. There had been a terrible war that not only destroyed the infrastructure, but also the human spirit. But there is still technology there, waiting to be discovered and used. He adds that he still hopes to access that technology and manage to return home, to his time and his people. He runs after the robot and removes the backpack from its back to eat, replenishing his energy for what lies ahead. After finishing his meal, he returns the bag to the robot's back, which continues its path toward a small city in ruins, a battlefield that was now just a shadow of what was once glorious. The robot stops suddenly in the middle of the street and looks at James, who does not understand much of what is happening. Soon afterward, the robot releases a smoke grenade onto the ground, creating a thick gray curtain just before they are hit by gunfire from drones patrolling the area. James runs to hide in one of the nearby structures, while the robot remains under the cover of the thick smoke, waiting for the right moment to act. James then returns to save the robot, removing the bag from its back, causing it to follow him through the devastated corridors of the ruined building. Suddenly, some humanoid robots appear, and in a nefarious confrontation, begin attacking the drones, and during the exchange of gunfire, James takes the opportunity to escape the area with his robot companion. They reach a building that appears to be the entrance to one of the underground shelters, but as they approach, a large artillery piece activates, and it becomes clear that it is an anti-aircraft weapon, which begins firing at various drones approaching toward the shelter. James quickly enters one of the passages, and as he approaches the door, a kind of presence sensor opens it automatically, releasing a gust of air that makes James nauseous, causing him to vomit. He then decides to equip himself with the gas mask and wields the weapon he found earlier before entering the bunker, his new refuge amid the horror. James follows the staircases of the shelter, going deeper into that place, crossing long and suffocating corridors where only his breathing through the gas mask and the water dripping from the pipes can be heard, creating an oppressive atmosphere. Suddenly, one of the humanoid robots appears and moves toward him. James, in a survival impulse, shoots at the robot which, to his surprise, does not retaliate and merely continues on its path, as if it were a puppet in the hands of its programmer. James then flees, reaching an area with several doors. The robot continues approaching him, but James realizes the robot is not pursuing him, then veering off its path in a programmed movement. The robot passes by James and heads toward one of the doors, entering a password that opens it easily. James observes that behind the door is a human body in an advanced state of decomposition. Basically, only a skeleton remains, a horrific testimony of what had happened there. As he cautiously approaches the corpse to analyze it, James receives a voice message from the base on his communicator, indicating they received his previous messages and are coming to rescue him soon. While listening to the audio, James moves along one of the corridors, reaching a sort of control room with various monitoring equipment, like radars and cameras, which seem to be the control base for the underground shelter. Observing through the cameras that everyone present is dead, in a moment of fury and frustration, he ends up attacking one of the nearby skeletons, a desperate act that brings no solace. After catching his breath, James, now exhausted, observes some posters on the wall, and as he approaches, fragments of information reveal the terrible truth. This is not an alien planet. It is actually Earth itself in a distant, post-apocalyptic future. The arrival of his species, the aliens, triggered a devastating war that annihilated humanity. The robots now patrolling the planet were the war machines created by humans to fight against the invaders, turning everything into a sea of destruction. James is desolate and powerless with the revelation and decides to go to the surface. He points the gun at his own head, but cannot pull the trigger. At that moment, he observes that the great machine in the sky, Machine 2, the portal to his home, was being fiercely attacked and destroyed by the planet's remaining defenses. His last hope dissolved into a silent ball of fire in the sky, a bitter reminder of a future that would never be reached, lost and trapped forever on that planet that, one day, his species had destroyed in their quest for a new home.